The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had always been a place of shadows and secrets. But in the darkest, most isolated regions, a project unlike any in human history was taking shape, a testament to humanity's most audacious dreams and most carefully guarded ambitions. Michael Anderson stood at the central observation deck of Outpost Omega, a research facility so classified that its very existence was known to fewer than 20 people in the entire world. His weathered hands traced holographic schematics that seemed to defy the fundamental laws of physics, each line and curve representing years of painstaking research and innovation. The journey had begun decades ago, in the aftermath of humanity's first truly devastating encounter with extraterrestrial intelligence. The Jarak incursion of 2089 had been brief but traumatic, a swift demonstration of how utterly outmatched humanity was in the broader galactic ecosystem. Entire colonies had been wiped out in moments, their defenses swept aside like children's toys against a hurricane of technological superiority. But humans had a remarkable talent for learning from defeat. The initial survivors, military strategists, quantum physicists, materials engineers, had formed a secret coalition. Their mission was simple yet impossible: develop a technological response that could level the playing field, not through brute force, but through innovation that would make the galactic powers reconsider their dismissive view of humanity. Anderson remembered the early days. Funding was nearly impossible to secure. Government agencies and private research institutions had laughed at their proposals. Impossible, they'd said. A waste of resources. But Anderson and his team knew better. They began with fundamental research that seemed unrelated: quantum entanglement studies, advanced materials science, biomimetic engineering, neural-machine interfaces. Each breakthrough was meticulously hidden, published in obscure journals under mundane titles that would never attract serious attention from potential competitors, alien or human. The current iteration of the project had been 15 years in development. What started as theoretical models had gradually transformed into something tangible. The UES Prometheus was more than a ship. It was a living system, an adaptive platform that could transform itself based on environmental conditions and strategic requirements. Sarah Reyes, the project's lead quantum systems engineer, approached Anderson with a datapad filled with the latest simulation results. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. "We've solved the quantum stabilization issue," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The adaptive nanomatrix can now maintain coherence across multiple dimensional states." Anderson nodded, understanding the magnitude of what she was saying. Most scientists would require hours to explain such a breakthrough. Between them, a single glance communicated volumes. The facility itself was a marvel of hidden engineering. Embedded deep within a network of interconnected asteroids, it used advanced gravitational manipulation technology to appear as nothing more than standard space debris to external scanners. Each asteroid was a module, capable of independent movement and reconfiguration. What looked like a random collection of space rocks was actually a mobile research complex that could disappear without a trace. Power was drawn from multiple sources: solar collection arrays disguised as ordinary asteroid surfaces, quantum vacuum energy generators, and a revolutionary cold fusion system that produced zero detectable emissions. Every system was designed with multiple redundancies and camouflage mechanisms. "The latest material tests are promising," Rice continued, swiping through holographic displays. "The quantum-locked carbon ceramic composite can now absorb and redistribute energy at 97.3% efficiency. Previous iterations were lucky to manage 40%. Anderson understood the implications. They weren't just building a ship. They were creating a technological ecosystem that could adapt, learn, and respond to threats in ways no existing civilization could comprehend. Outside the observation window, robotic construction systems moved with precise, almost organic movements. Massive structural components took shape, not through traditional welding or assembly, but through advanced molecular reconstruction techniques that allowed materials to essentially grow and reshape themselves. The human race had been underestimated for the last time. As the holographic schematics danced around him, Michael Anderson allowed himself the briefest hint of a smile. The galactic hegemony had no idea what was coming. The Jarek Imperial fleet emerged from subspace with the calculated precision of a predatory organism. 47 massive dreadnoughts materialized simultaneously, their obsidian hulls absorbing and refracting light in ways that made them look like living shadows against the stark backdrop of the solar system. Ambassador Cathax, a towering six-limbed creature whose exoskeleton gleamed with intricate biomechanical augmentations, surveyed the holographic displays with a mixture of contempt and professional detachment. Humanity had been on the galactic radar for decades, a primitive species barely worthy of notice, certainly not worthy of genuine respect. Initiate standard protocol. Cathax mandated to his bridge crew. The command was translated across multiple communication spectrums, radio, quantum entanglement channels, even biological resonance frequencies. It was a transmission designed to be impossible to ignore. The standard protocol was simple. It had worked for the Jarek Empire across hundreds of conquered star systems. A declarative transmission of galactic law, followed by an ultimatum, then immediate preparations for either surrender or subjugation. What they received was something entirely unexpected. Absolute silence. Not just radio silence. Complete electromagnetic silence. The kind of nothing that shouldn't be possible in a technologically inhabited star system. Initial scans showed Earth intact. Orbital infrastructure present. Multiple communication satellites. Planetary defense networks. But no response. No panic. No fear. Just nothing. Cathax's secondary sensory clusters began to twitch, a biological response that among his species indicated mounting tension. Something was fundamentally wrong with this scenario. Run diagnostic, he commanded, his translator rendering the words in perfect, emotionless standard galactic. The bridge crew worked with mechanical precision, checking and rechecking every possible communication channel. Each scan returned the same result. Total communication void. Xenobiological profiles suggested this was impossible. Primitive species like humans were supposed to be loud, chaotic, desperate. They should be transmitting pleas, threats, negotiation attempts. Humanity's previous encounters with the Jarek had been characterized by precisely such frantic communication. This silence was something else entirely. On the Imperial Dreadnought's massive bridge, holographic displays began to flutter. Not with interference, but with something more unsettling. Momentary glimpses of data that shouldn't exist. Quantum communication signatures that defied known encryption protocols. Fragments of information that seemed to dance at the edge of comprehension. Cathax felt something unprecedented, a biological response that his species had not experienced in generations. Fear. The junior communication specialist, a young Jarek named Vexthar, suddenly went rigid. Ambassador, he said, his translator vibrating with an unusual frequency, our communication networks are changing. Before Cathax could respond, entire sections of the Imperial communication grid began to dissolve, not through any conventional form of attack. The networks were being rewritten, restructured by something that understood their fundamental architecture at a level that suggested not just technological superiority, but a kind of communication that was fundamentally alien. This was not hacking. This was linguistic reconstruction at a quantum level. Backup communication protocols activated automatically. Encrypted channels that should have been impenetrable began to leak information, not through brute force decryption, but through a form of intellectual osmosis that suggested whoever was doing this understood the Jarek communication systems better than the Jarek themselves. Tactical displays began to show impossible data. Movement vectors that shouldn't make sense. Energy signatures that violated known physical laws. The Imperial fleet's defensive postures, meticulously developed over centuries of galactic conquest, were being analyzed, understood, and fundamentally challenged in real time. Cathax realized, with a sense of growing horror, that they were no longer in control of this encounter. Humanity was speaking, and they were doing so in a language the Gerak had never even known existed. The moment of emergence was nothing like any known method of faster-than-light travel. Space itself seemed to develop microscopic fractures, like glass under impossible pressure, then simply heal. The UES Prometheus materialized with a quantum precision that defied conventional understanding. It wasn't a simple appearance. It was a comprehensive reconfiguration of spatial temporal mechanics, where moments before there had been empty space, now existed a vessel that looked less like a traditional spacecraft and more like a living, breathing technological organism. Michael Anderson watched from the ship's primary control center, his hands hovering above holographic interfaces that responded to the merest hint of muscular intention. Around him, a crew of 30 specialists moved with the synchronized precision of a single organism. They weren't just operating a ship, they were interfacing with a complex system that was as much a living entity as a technological construct. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead quantum systems engineer, monitored a cascade of data streams that would have overwhelmed any conventional computer system. The Prometheus's adaptive matrix was processing information across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Each microsecond contained more computational complexity than entire generations of supercomputers. The ship's exterior was a marvel of engineering that seemed to defy physical laws. Adaptive nanomaterials shifted and reconfigured continuously, creating a surface that was simultaneously solid and fluid. Sensors and weapon systems didn't just emerge from the hull. They grew, like organic structures responding to environmental stimuli. Quantum stabilization at 99.7%, Rodriguez called out, her voice calm despite the unprecedented nature of their deployment. Dimensional coherence maintaining optimal parameters. The Imperial Fleet's sensor arrays began to register the Prometheus's presence and immediately began to fail. It wasn't that the ship was invisible. It was something far more unsettling. The ship existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously present and not present, detectable and undetectable. Aboard the lead Gerak dreadnought, sensor technicians watched in mounting horror as their most advanced scanning systems simply broke down. It wasn't interference. It was a fundamental deconstruction of their technological understanding. Gravitational signature is impossible, muttered senior technician Krell, his multiple sensory appendages trembling. The readings suggested the Prometheus had mass, and simultaneously suggested it had no mass at all. Quantum mechanics made flesh, or rather, made metal and composite materials. The ship's movement defied traditional propulsion understanding. Instead of acceleration and deceleration, it seemed to simply exist in different locations, with space itself bending around its presence. Each movement was a complex mathematical equation made real, a dance of physics that suggested complete mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe. Michael Anderson's neural interface allowed him to perceive the ship's systems in a way no previous human technology had ever achieved. He could feel the quantum interactions, understand the complex mathematical language of the ship's adaptive systems. It was less like controlling a vessel and more like conducting a living symphony. Defensive matrices are online, announced Sarah Chen, the Tactical Systems Coordinator. Imperial weapons signatures are being analyzed and categorized in real time. The Prometheus began to emit a series of quantum communication pulses, not messages in any traditional sense, but complex information packets that simultaneously contained multiple layers of meaning. To the Gerak communication systems, it would appear as pure noise. To those who could truly understand, it was a comprehensive analysis of the entire Imperial fleet's capabilities, weaknesses, and potential response vectors. Weapon systems on the Imperial dreadnoughts began to power up, a reflexive response to the unknown threat. But something was different. The targeting systems seemed to lose coherence the moment they attempted to lock onto the Prometheus. It was as if the ship existed in a state of perpetual quantum uncertainty. Adaptive camouflage at maximum efficiency, Rodriguez reported. We're essentially invisible, not through conventional stealth, but by existing in a state that cannot be precisely measured. The universe itself seemed to pause, holding its breath. The Prometheus had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first Imperial strike was meant to be apocalyptic. 47 dreadnoughts unleashed a coordinated weapon salvo designed to obliterate entire planetary ecosystems. Coherent energy beams capable of splitting continents, quantum disruptors that could unravel molecular structures, gravitational compression weapons that could crush entire cities into microscopic points, all converged on the location of the Prometheus. The weapon signatures would have vaporized any known defensive system in the galaxy. The Prometheus simply absorbed them. Michael Anderson watched the incoming assault with clinical detachment. Around him, the ship's control center hummed with an almost supernatural calm. Each crew member was neural-linked to the vessel's systems, experiencing the incoming attack not as a threat, but as a complex mathematical problem to be solved. Energy absorption at 92.6%, called out Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe and pulse with living information, weapon signatures being analyzed and converted. What happened next defied every known principle of defensive warfare. The massive energy strikes that should have obliterated the Prometheus were instead captured, analyzed, and transformed. The ship's adaptive nano-armor didn't just block the attacks, it studied them. Each weapon signature was broken down into its fundamental quantum components, its energy redirected and repurposed. The Imperial Dreadnought's most devastating weapons were literally being turned into additional power for the human vessel. Aboard the lead Jurak Dreadnought, Ambassador Cathax watched in mounting horror. Their primary weapon systems, developed over centuries of galactic conquest, were being rendered completely ineffective. More than ineffective. They were being turned against the very fleet that launched them. Holographic displays began to show impossible readings. The Prometheus wasn't just defending itself, it was learning. Each weapon strike was producing a corresponding defensive adaptation. Quantum compression weapons that should have crushed the ship into subatomic particles were instead being used to reinforce the vessel's structural integrity. Energy beams designed to strip away molecular bonds were being converted into power for the ship's quantum computing systems. Adaptive Matrix is showing unprecedented response patterns, Sarah Chen reported, her voice steady despite the unprecedented nature of what they were witnessing. We're seeing real-time molecular reconstruction at quantum levels. The ship's exterior began to shift and transform. It wasn't just changing color or shape. It was fundamentally restructuring its molecular composition in response to each incoming attack. Sections hit by gravitational compression weapons would momentarily compress, then immediately expand back to their original configuration, having absorbed and redistributed the kinetic energy. Thax's secondary sensory clusters, biological systems developed through millennia of evolutionary warfare, began to produce chemical signals of pure, unadulterated terror. This was not just technological superiority. This was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. The Prometheus's defensive systems weren't just blocking attacks. They were engaging in a form of technological communication. Each weapon signature was being analyzed, its underlying principles understood, and then integrated into the ship's own systems. Weapon signature library expanding, Rodriguez announced. We're developing comprehensive defensive protocols against every known Imperial weapon system. Within moments of the initial assault, the Imperial fleet found itself in a nightmare scenario. Their most advanced weapons were not just ineffective. They were actively being used against them. The Prometheus was turning the entire battle into a complex, ever-evolving computational problem. Sensor technicians aboard the Jurak dreadnoughts watched in mounting panic as their weapon systems began to fail. It wasn't that the weapons were being blocked. They were being fundamentally rewritten at a quantum level. The universe itself seemed to pause, recalibrating its understanding of what was possible. Humanity had just demonstrated that technology was not about destruction. It was about understanding, about adaptation, about transformation. and the galaxy would never be the same again. Communication networks across the Jarak Imperial fleet began to dissolve in ways that defied comprehension. It wasn't a traditional hack or cyber attack. What the Prometheus was doing was far more insidious, a complete deconstruction of communication itself. Dr. Marcus Williams, the Prometheus's lead xenocommunication specialist, worked with a precision that bordered on the mystical. His team had spent decades studying not just alien languages, but the fundamental principles of interspecies communication. They understood that true communication was far more than simple information exchange. It was a complex dance of context, perception, and psychological manipulation. Initiating quantum communication cascade, Williams murmured, his neural interface allowing him to perceive communication channels as living, breathing entities. The first wave of transmissions were designed to be deliberately incomprehensible. Complex mathematical sequences that simultaneously contained multiple layers of meaning. Quantum-encoded messages that would simultaneously exist in multiple states of interpretation. To the Jarak communication systems, it would appear as pure chaos. But it was far from chaos. Each transmission was a carefully constructed psychological probe. The messages were designed to exploit the fundamental cognitive weaknesses in the Jarak neural architecture. Linguistic patterns that would create cognitive dissonance, communication sequences that would gradually erode the Imperial fleet's sense of technological superiority. Aboard the lead dreadnought, communication specialists began to experience something unprecedented. Their most advanced translation matrices started to break down. It wasn't that they couldn't understand the incoming transmissions. They were experiencing something far more terrifying. They were understanding too much. Fragments of information began to leak through. Complex data packets that contain not just words, but entire contextual universes. The Jarak found themselves confronting communication that was simultaneously a weapon, a diplomatic overture, and a comprehensive analysis of their entire species' communication paradigms. Ambassador Cathax watched in mounting horror as his fleet's communication networks began to fragment. What was happening was beyond technological warfare. This was a fundamental assault on the very concept of communication itself. The humans are speaking, muttered Senior Technician Krell, and they're speaking in a language we've never even conceived of existing. The psychological warfare went far beyond simple information manipulation. The Prometheus was demonstrating a level of linguistic and cognitive understanding that suggested something terrifying. The humans understood the Jarak better than the Jarak understood themselves. Transmission patterns began to emerge that seemed to target specific psychological vulnerabilities. Complex message structures that would trigger deep-seated neural responses. Communication sequences designed to create cascading uncertainty within the Imperial command structure. Sarah Chen monitored the communication assault with clinical precision. Psychological destabilization protocols at 78.3% efficiency, she reported. We're systematically dismantling their communication hierarchy. It wasn't just about preventing communication. It was about redefining what communication could be. The Prometheus began to broadcast on frequencies that should have been impossible. Quantum-entangled communication channels that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional states. Messages that would be received before they were sent. Communication packets that contained their own context and meta-analysis. Aboard the Imperial dreadnoughts, communication specialists began to experience something unprecedented. Neural systems designed for interstellar communication started to malfunction in increasingly bizarre ways. Translation matrices would produce responses that were simultaneously perfect and completely incomprehensible. Marcus Williams allowed himself the briefest hint of a smile. This was more than a battle. This was a comprehensive demonstration of humanity's true potential. The Imperial fleet's communication networks were no longer just being disrupted. They were being fundamentally reimagined. And the Jarak were beginning to understand that they were facing something far beyond a traditional military encounter. This was a complete reconstruction of the rules of engagement, linguistic, technological, and psychological. Humanity had arrived, and they were speaking a language the galaxy had never heard before. Precision was humanity's most devastating weapon. The Prometheus began its systematic deconstruction of the Imperial fleet with a level of calculated restraint that was more terrifying than outright destruction. Each Imperial dreadnought was methodically disabled, not obliterated, but rendered completely inoperable with surgical accuracy that bordered on the supernatural. Quantum disruption fields targeted specific systems. Power networks collapsed without physical damage. Communication arrays were systematically neutralized, leaving each ship functioning but fundamentally blind and isolated. It was less an attack and more a comprehensive demonstration of technological superiority. Michael Anderson watched the strategic dismantling from the ship's primary control center. His team wasn't just fighting a battle, they were conducting an elaborate educational demonstration for an entire galactic civilization. Disable sequence at 72.4%, reported Sarah Chen, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces, creating optimal escape vectors for Imperial crew members. The most shocking element wasn't the technological supremacy. It was the mercy. Each disabled ship received an automated communication package, not a threat, but a comprehensive analysis of why they had been stopped. Detailed reports outlined the technological vulnerabilities that had been exploited, complete with suggested improvements. It was less an act of war and more a galactic performance review. Dr. Elena Rodriguez managed the communication protocols with scientific precision. "We're providing them a choice," she explained to Anderson. "Complete technological understanding or continued isolation." Ambassador Cathax watched in mounting confusion. The humans weren't conquering. They were teaching. Escape pods began to launch from the disabled Imperial vessels. But these weren't panicked evacuations. They were carefully managed extractions, with the Prometheus's systems ensuring safe passage for every single crew member. Advanced medical scanners monitored each pod, providing real-time medical support and environmental stabilization. The Imperial communication networks, previously shattered by the Prometheus's quantum linguistic assault, now received something unexpected. Comprehensive data packages that explained, in perfect Jarek linguistic patterns, exactly what had just occurred. It wasn't just a description of events. It was a complete forensic analysis of the encounter, including detailed breakdowns of technological vulnerabilities, strategic miscalculations, and potential paths for technological evolution. "We're giving them a roadmap," Anderson murmured, "not a battlefield." Senior Technician Krell, monitoring the communication from the lead dreadnought, found himself experiencing an emotion rarely felt by his species, genuine intellectual humility. The humans weren't just superior. They were offering a hand of collaborative understanding. The Prometheus's weapon systems remained powered, but they weren't aggressive. They were protective, creating a controlled environment that prevented any potential counterattack while simultaneously demonstrating absolute defensive capability. Medical support streams began broadcasting to every Imperial vessel. Detailed physiological analyses, recommended treatments for stress responses, psychological support protocols. It was a level of comprehensive care that suggested the humans viewed the entire Imperial fleet not as an enemy, but as a complex system to be understood and supported. "Diplomatic engagement protocols are online," Chen reported. "We're presenting them with a choice, not submission, but collaboration." Each disabled ship received a unique quantum encryption key, an invitation to future communication, but not a demand. A door left open, but not forced. The humans were offering a path, not mandating a journey. The galaxy watched in collective amazement. Humanity had just redefined the concept of first contact. They hadn't conquered. They had extended an invitation to understand. And the Jarek Empire was about to receive the most comprehensive lesson in technological and diplomatic evolution in galactic history. News of the encounter spread faster than light itself. Quantum communication networks across multiple star systems began to pulse with fragments of information that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. The Jarek Imperial Fleet, a force considered invincible for millennia, had been comprehensively neutralized by a species previously regarded as little more than a technological footnote. The first transmissions were met with universal disbelief. Multiple galactic intelligence agencies ran and reran their data analysis, searching for some explanation, some hidden variable that could make sense of what had occurred. Dr. Marcus Williams watched the galactic response with a mixture of scientific curiosity and strategic calculation. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was a comprehensive message to every spacefaring civilization in the known universe. Transmission analysis complete, reported Sarah Chen from her communication station. We're seeing cascading information spread across 17 different communication networks. The most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the galaxy began to piece together a narrative that challenged everything they understood about technological development. The human encounter wasn't just a military engagement. It was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could represent. On the crystalline communication hub of the Viridian Concordance, a neutral scientific collective that monitored galactic technological developments, senior researchers found themselves experiencing genuine intellectual vertigo. The data packages from the encounter suggested technological capabilities that shouldn't exist, quantum communication protocols that defied known physical limitations, adaptive systems that could learn and transform at speeds previously thought impossible. Ambassador Cathax's official report, transmitted across Imperial communication networks, only amplified the confusion. Instead of a narrative of defeat, it was a comprehensive analysis that read more like an academic paper. Detailed breakdowns of human technological capabilities, extensive documentation of the Prometheus's defensive and communicative strategies, a report that seemed to suggest the Jarak viewed their encounter not as a military defeat, but as a profound learning experience. Michael Anderson understood the psychological warfare they were conducting. This wasn't about demonstrating military superiority. It was about fundamentally reshaping galactic perception. The Prometheus began broadcasting carefully constructed information packages, not just technical data, but comprehensive cultural context, glimpses of human scientific development, philosophical frameworks that explained their approach to technological innovation. Each transmission was a carefully designed invitation to understand, not to fear. Multiple alien civilizations found themselves confronting a profound question. What if technological superiority wasn't about destruction, but about understanding? The Corvin Stellar Collaborative, a network of research-focused civilizations, began intensive analysis of the encounter. Their quantum AI systems worked around the clock, trying to deconstruct the technological marvel that was the Prometheus. It's not just a ship, Dr. Elena Rodriguez explained during a secured quantum transmission to select galactic research networks. It's a living system of technological understanding. Each interaction is a learning opportunity. Sensor networks across multiple star systems began to detect subtle changes. The encounter wasn't just a local event. It was sending ripples through the fundamental understanding of technological development. The most terrifying aspect for many advanced civilizations wasn't the Prometheus's technological capabilities. It was the philosophical approach behind those capabilities. Humanity had demonstrated a level of technological maturity that suggested something profound. True advancement wasn't about power, but about potential. Diplomatic channels that had previously dismissed humanity now found themselves scrambling to understand. Research networks began intense studies of human technological development. What had been considered a primitive species was now being viewed as a potential paradigm shift in galactic technological evolution. The Prometheus became more than a ship. It became a symbol of what technological development could represent when guided by comprehensive understanding rather than destructive impulse. Across the galaxy, civilizations watched, studied, wondered. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The United Earth Defense Council convened in a secure facility deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, far from the prying eyes of any potential observers. Michael Anderson stood at the center of a holographic projection that displayed the comprehensive results of the Prometheus's mission. We didn't just demonstrate technological superiority, Anderson explained to the assembled global leaders. We rewrote the fundamental rules of galactic engagement. The mission had been about far more than a single encounter with the Jarek Imperial fleet. It was a calculated, generations-long strategy to fundamentally transform humanity's position in the galactic ecosystem. Dr. Elena Rodriguez presented the initial data streams. Quantum communication networks were lighting up with unprecedented levels of diplomatic interest. Species that had previously ignored or dismissed humanity were now sending detailed research requests, diplomatic inquiries, and collaborative proposals. The technological blueprints for the Prometheus's defensive systems would be shared, not as a weapon, but as a deterrent, a comprehensive package that demonstrated humanity's commitment to collaborative advancement rather than conquest. We're offering a new model of technological development, Sarah Chen added, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Not domination, not subjugation, but mutual understanding. The Jarek Empire, once considered an immovable force of galactic conquest, now found itself at a critical juncture. The encounter with the Prometheus had not just neutralized their military capabilities, it had fundamentally challenged their entire philosophical approach to technological advancement. Diplomatic channels began to open in ways that defied previous galactic communication models. The Prometheus had demonstrated that true technological superiority was about adaptability, understanding, and collaborative potential. Quantum communication networks began broadcasting comprehensive technological packages, not just defensive capabilities, but foundational research, philosophical frameworks, and invitations to collaborative scientific exploration. It was a level of open-source technological sharing that was unprecedented in galactic history. The Viridian Concordance, a collective of scientific civilizations, found themselves receiving data packages that suggested humanity had been developing these technologies in secret for decades, not as a weapon of war, but as a comprehensive approach to technological and philosophical evolution. Ambassador Cathax, once a symbol of imperial conquest, now found himself in the unprecedented position of becoming a diplomatic bridge. The Imperial fleet's encounter with the Prometheus had been so comprehensively documented that it was already being studied in academic institutions across multiple star systems. "We are offering a new path," Michael Anderson stated during a secured quantum transmission to galactic research networks. Not submission, not conquest, but collaborative potential. The most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the galaxy began to understand the true depth of humanity's strategy. The Prometheus wasn't just a technological marvel. It was a comprehensive philosophical statement about the nature of technological advancement. Planetary defense networks across multiple civilizations began to recalibrate their understanding. Humanity had demonstrated that true security wasn't about overwhelming force, but about comprehensive understanding and adaptive potential. Research networks that had previously dismissed human technological capabilities now found themselves scrambling to understand the comprehensive approach demonstrated by the Prometheus. It wasn't just about defensive capabilities. It was about a fundamental reimagining of technological development. The shared technological packages included more than just defensive systems. They contained comprehensive research frameworks, philosophical approaches to technological innovation, and invitations to collaborative scientific exploration. Humanity was offering not just technology, but a new way of understanding technological advancement. Global leaders watched as diplomatic channels began to open in unprecedented ways. Species that had previously existed in isolated technological silos now found themselves invited into a comprehensive framework of collaborative advancement. The Prometheus had done more than win a battle. It had fundamentally altered the perception of an entire galactic civilization. Humanity had arrived, and they were offering the galaxy something far more valuable than conquest: a new way of understanding.